Okay, good evening everyone. I'm Olivia Baldock from DIA, and sat next to me is Sue Vernon, who is the owner of Surrey Drivability, and she's going to be sharing her knowledge again this evening. We're very lucky to have her to share her knowledge on the subject this time of mature or older drivers. Now, however you want to, whatever we want to
call them.
Yeah.
Call them a lot of things sometimes, I'm sure.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you know, the more mature driver. You know, there are certain things that we need to look out for. There could be certain health things or licensing things and things like that. So Sue's going to give us a quick whistle-stop tour of that tonight. There's always, you know, so much more to know about everything. So Sue's going to give us a quick overview, really, which is all you can do in an hour on this subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, okie dokie. So hopefully everyone can see the screen. Just make sure, if you could just, a couple of you, if you check, I know some of you are quite quick off the mark with your typing. So if you could just say, yeah, I can see the screen. You should see the welcome to the DIA webinar, Introduction to Drivers with Diverse Needs and Mature Drivers. So yeah, fantastic. Right, we're in business. So I'm going to hand you over to our very capable hands of Sue, who in just a moment. But first of all, what I need to do is just go through very quickly our sponsors. The sponsors, these guys are the DIA sponsors for 2015. And without these good people, we wouldn't be able to run our national standards training days, our driver behaviour professional development days, which are coming up from March, and the drivers with diverse needs introductory course that Sue's running for us in March and April, just to begin with. We'd like to roll more out. We have got lots of suggestions as to who wants Sue next, of to chop her up and distribute her around the country with all their knowledge. So these guys, CA Cars, our car rental firm, they are great people for hire cars. So if your car's off the road for a little while, then you can hire a car, dual control car from them. We've got Collingwood Insurance, and they support the learner driver, so you can get separate insurance for mum and dad's car. So any more details on that, then you can always email us at DIA at help@driving.org. You've got Ingenie, you may have seen them, heard of them. They're the guys and girls who deal with the insurance and black boxes and telematics and things like that. And we've got Face for Business. This is the company that ADIs really need when it comes to answering the phone. ADIs are now, I'm speaking to a bunch of ADIs, and luckily you can't throw anything at me tonight. But I am going to say it. They're not the best at answering the phone sometimes because you're busy. You're on the lessons or in between lessons, and it's very difficult to pick that phone up and deal with new customers. So Face for Business do this all for you. You get dedicated PA, you get all sorts of things on there. So if anyone wants any more information on that, then please come to us on that as well. And then Goodyear, the tyre people, we all know Goodyear are. So they're great for you know, they've supported our events and things like that with tyres and lots of bits and bobs. So okay, so that's the sponsors done. So that's the boring bit over, but they're the people with the money. We've got to give them a mention. Right, so I'm going to hand you over to Sue.
Okay, good evening everyone. So we're going to talk tonight about the senior driver, the mature driver, the elderly driver, whatever you want to term it. I thought I'd just start off with an introduction to one of my stars. This gentleman is the oldest gentleman that I have ever had, that I've assessed, and who gave me a good drive. And when I'm in a real live teaching situation, I usually ask the room full of people to guess how old he is. So maybe you can scrutinise your screen and have a little think about how old do you think he is. Now, if I wait for you all to answer through the chat box, we might actually lose a bit of time, but I will, as you've had a little chance to look at him, I will tell you he was 94. Oh, Julia, well done. Jean, spot on. Look at that. I can see them coming in. Well done. Did you know him by any chance? I hasten to say I have a wonderful handwritten letter from him giving me permission to use his photograph. Okay, so yeah, so what is it about this 94-year-old that helped him to actually be a good driver? Let's have a look. He lived, the building behind him is his residential home. So that's a little thought at the start. He's not managing at home. He's gone into care. That's not a good pointer. However, his mental agility was really good. Now, you'll notice that possibly the more sharp-eyed of you will have noticed in the previous slide that the car has a little map of Guernsey on the side. That is my Guernsey assessment car, and we are now on Guernsey. And here is the number plate on a Guernsey car. They don't have any letters, they just have numbers. And this gentleman said, who was very well spoken I had, he said, "Do you know what I hate?" He said, "Numbers that add up to 13. So there we were driving along and he was busy doing mental arithmetic. And I'm thinking, you are sharp. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what was going on inside his head. Equally, in his residential home, when I went in there to meet him, he said, "Come and have a look and see what I'm doing." And on the dining table was a technical Lego set for age 17 plus that he was building. So there were no flies on him. So he may have been the exception rather than the rule, but there was quite a lot of evidence that he was still pretty sharp mentally and indeed physically. So that leads us to that gathering of information before you take somebody out. What's their lifestyle? What are they capable of? That gives you a bit of an idea what you're dealing with. So if we now go and have a look at the next slide, that's the point I want to make here, that it's the person's functional ability, not the number of birthdays that they've had, that really tells us whether they might be able to drive or not. So I famously say at assessment introductions, I am not ageist. It's how you manage that counts. And I noticed that a couple of questions that have come in. We've got a client one was about somebody who's 89, and another one, somebody who's 94. So really, that's great. It's not the age that matters. So the functional ability, we need to look at the physical ability, any stiff necks, that's mentioned in one of the questions, any arthritis, any pain. Pain is a real distraction to driving. So we need to make that driving seating position as comfortable as possible. Any sort of mental faculties that are beginning to reduce, mainly reaction times in the sort of normal aging process, we slow down. So it's nothing medical particularly, but we slow down. And indeed that might reflect across to one of the questions where it said that one of the assessment services in the UK had said somebody wasn't able to drive, but the doctor had given them a clear bill of health. The doctor might say they're healthy, but there are some other changes coming along, so cognitive is one of them. And we've mentioned reaction times. And the other thing we need to bear in mind is that lots of years of driving experience can, to a degree, compensate for mildly reducing general abilities. And for a while, you get a sort of balance going on that it's still okay to drive, even though a few things aren't quite working as they used to. So the problem is insight, that we all actually get stuck thinking we're about 21. And here's one of my young lad drivers. I won't take too much about him because otherwise I might be contravening various security directives. But he's one of the guys I've seen. And in the public arena, if you go to that YouTube reference at the bottom under the picture, you will find out a little bit more about him. And can I just say, get a hanky, get a glass of wine, sit down and watch that little clip, and it's pretty good. Anyway, and I think I'd just like to add, and it all started in my Ford Fiesta. So anyway, he's one of my lads. So we all get stuck thinking we are about like him, and elderly drivers are always older than us. So speaking as somebody who's rapidly approaching that sort of end of the arena, it's very true. I'm still 21. So monitoring your performance and monitoring whether it's time for you to give up driving is actually extraordinarily difficult for that particular driver to do for themselves. Some do, but not many. Usually it's a little prang or a little scrape that actually reduces confidence and causes people to give up. So what sort of scale of things are we looking at? If we have a look at how many older drivers there are out there, on the AAE website, the reference below the picture there, I found that there's more than 1 million drivers in the UK who are over 80. Now, with an ageing population, of course, this is going to increase. Research has shown that most people give up their driving licence round about the age of 80. Might be 2 or 3 years before, might be 2 or 3 years after. But the average is 80. So if you are having that conversation with somebody, that's quite a useful little fact to throw in, because it helps if you feel you're normal. So it's like, oh gosh, I'm younger than most people and I'm having to give up driving. That's not a nice feeling. So around about 80 is about right. So, you know, that high street situation that we've got in that picture there gives you an idea of how much attention is required and how much is going on and the multitasking. So the actual ability to do that is really quite difficult. So let's move along and have a look at that whole issue of what driving is used for by older people and why it's important to keep driving as long as possible. I'd just like you to take half a moment to think about these 3 questions. Being as I'm talking to a whole load of ADIs, I think some answers are pretty obvious, like work. But have a think of all those other things that you do, apart from work. Why is driving important? For what purposes do you drive? And what could you have not done today if you could not drive? For me, it would have been somewhat more difficult to get down to this venue where we're doing the webinar. I had a bag with my laptop in, and I brought a contribution to the drinks cabinet.
Yeah, the venue's Olivia's house. Apparently sat at a dining table.
Can I just add, it's a white wine spritzer. It is not a white wine, all right?
No, I can vouch for that.
So, you know, there's a small thing. It would have been ever so much more difficult for me to do this if I hadn't been able to drive down. So during the banter, no doubt you've had a little think about what you couldn't do, and that's quite important, isn't it? So let's have a look and see what research shows about why it's important to drive. Now, there's been a really nice paper done by Carol Hawley, and it started out looking at how important driving is for everyone. And if you have a look at the reasons down the left-hand side, you'll see, and I've just spotted, I have no idea why 140 is there at the top of the list. Absolute typo, that is, so please ignore that. The reason, and then they go on down from there. And the big one is independence. But the convenience of using a car, I mean, ringing for a taxi or looking up the bus timetable is just not that easy, because I can't just walk out, sit in the car and go when I want to. I have to wait and I have to organise. So convenience. Oh, thank you, Olivia. Look, no sooner said than done.
Magic.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. I'm totally distracted now. Yeah, so all you can read the list as well as me, so I'm not going to read it out. But you can see that it's absolutely vital to most of our lifestyles. So going on down again, looking at lifestyle and what it means to give up driving. It's a nice little research paper, and those of you who've been with us for the last few sessions, you might remember talking about what you do needs to be evidence-based when we did the working within the law. So here's a little bit of research evidence to what happens when you give up driving. And general health will decline. And in fact, I did find a paper that said that you're more likely to die within 3 years of giving up driving than if you hadn't given up driving. I didn't include that one because there is the flip side of if you carry on driving when you're not safe, I rather suspect that you are rather likely to die from other causes. Yeah, so perhaps absolutely. It's not such a good paper to quote. But the point is that your ability to drive really does help with your mental agility and maintaining your health. So we need to think about how we can sustain driving mobility among older adults. Oh, I notice Elaine has joined us. I know she's working with somebody at the moment trying to sustain her driving ability. It's proving a little bit of a long project, but hello Elaine, and congratulations for all your patience. Next slide, please. Okay, so here in that from that report, that study that I've cited there, is a little graph showing the effect on people. So your social functioning goes right down. You can't go out and see people that you used to. You can't go places you used to. You can't go to clubs and organisations that you used to. And the health, there is the beginning of the downhill slide that happens at the point of driving cessation. There were a number of other graphs, but I just thought that makes the point that it doesn't do anybody any good. So we don't advise that lightly. So going on from there, just a little outline of some other papers that show how detrimental it is. So depression really starts to appear, and likelihood is that because we lose control of our lives, we're very dependent on other people. Outside activities go down. There's another study there by Maritelli. And greater risk of entry into long-term care. Quite often it means that suddenly somebody cannot manage independently at home and they have to go into some kind of residential care. So let's have a look. So one of the questions that I had said about somebody having limited neck movement, and they said that that person had had some exercises to increase the mobility, and that had helped. But actually, with very much the elderly driver, you need to be very aware of osteoporosis, which means thinning of the bone. Now, if you think of the skeleton and the top of the neck, the first two bones below the skull, the first one is a circle of bone and the second one has a peg which goes up into the centre. Imagine the circle being like a donut and the peg goes up into the hole of the donut. That is a pretty good way of explaining it. And you've got to be ever so careful with thinning of the bone in older people, because if you do too much neck mobility, that little peg will break. And being as that is above the level where the nerves go out for your lungs and your breathing processes, as you can tell, that is pretty terminal. It's one of the reasons why older people, older ladies, I'm going to say, shouldn't go to the hairdresser and use a back wash over the wash basin. I know that's got nothing to do with driving, but as you get older, you should have a front wash, because as you bend your head back over the wash basin, there have been cases where people have died on the spot because they've broken the peg. Oh, so do be careful of recommending that your driver has exercises for the neck.
Lots of people go around with dirty hair.
Yeah.
Terrified to wash
their hair.
Good,
so
great.
yeah, so the point is, yes, if a physio recommends it, of course have some neck exercises, but don't you go recommending it for your pupils. And the best thing is extra mirrors. Now we've mentioned them before. Ooh, I've got some extra mirrors somewhere. I think I've jumped a slide. I do apologise. I've jumped a slide in what I'm looking at the presentation. What's coming next? Olivia's doing it properly. So the next slide, let's look at, as well as extra mirrors, which we'll see in a minute, change to automatic will, if it's done early enough, will mean that it's easier to accommodate the change. Now, Elaine, who's joined us tonight, is currently working with a driver who is working very hard to get used to automatic after many years of driving. And it's proved particularly difficult because, of course, you've got those many years of driving reflex for manual car that you've got to unlearn. So you've got to learn a new start and move away routine. You've got to understand that it will creep unless you put the brake on in most cases. Older people feel the car's running away with them because the gears don't hold them back and it's got the creep. They really don't like it. They keep putting the clutch down and it's not there anymore. Those kind of things. Also, and I'm going to sound a bit sexist here, but quite often the men really don't want to drive an automatic because, as we know, proper driving is shifting a gear shift. You know, that's not proper, it's sissy driving. Certainly my young man you saw earlier in the green car, that's sissy driving. So, you know, they want to drive, learn, the idea is present automatic and show them how to drive it at its fullest capacity. That's the best way around the problem. However, by making the task simpler, the idea is that should leave more capacity for attention on other things. It doesn't always work, but it is worth a try. But the moral of the story is change early. Get used to automatic while you can still change your reflexes. Okay. So the other things we can do are addressing the physical aspects. Typical older driver things are arthritis, stiffness, joint pains, those kind of aches and pains that probably a few of us have got now and again. Controls adaptations, again, automatic. If you've got a stiff or painful left hip, well, why not? Go over to automatic. Parking brakes, arthritis usually gets you at the base of the thumb, just in front of the wrist there, and putting that button in on the parking brake plus pulling it up, ouch, that is really painful. So, yep, automatic electronic parking brake, why not? Fatigue is another big thing. And as we get older, we are more likely to be ill from various reasons. We get illnesses. And fatigue, you know, a whole day is just really tiring, just going down the supermarket and back. So think about that and think about, well, perhaps I'll take the bus this time because actually that drive is really tiring. For longer journeys, perhaps, think about public transport, think about the train, and just use your car for the local bits. The other thing that happens to us as we get older is we get shorter because our spine, the discs in our spine compress. So very often we see that elderly people just looking over the top of the steering wheel, if you're lucky, sometimes through it. And so thinking about extra height on the seat is good. We did discuss cushions on seats in the previous webinar. I just caution you about the liability and safety aspects of that. Do go and check that, but effectively tie the cushion on the seat. Okay. So here we are, here's the slide I thought we were going to look at earlier on. We have shown you these before, but a panoramic mirror means that you don't have to turn your neck at all. That particular one, it's a big sweep of mirror. It does make things look further away, so you do have to learn what the new image means. And a lot of people don't like it, but it's worth a try. The other one, the frog eye mirror, which I think is very familiar to a lot of ADIs, just clips on the top of your wing mirror, then that can be a viable alternative if somebody doesn't like the internal one. Okay, so the seating one, you mentioned about I was mentioning about the safety thing. By wedging the driver, the bottom comes up, but the knees don't come up under the wheel. So a wedge is very good, but it does take the bucketing out of the seat. So there is a risk of sliding forward and submarining under the seatbelt. So you do have to let them know so that they're fully informed in making that decision. A better way of dealing with shorter stature is actually to raise the seat. A car conversion specialist will do it for you so that it's a proper fixture done professionally. That's okay as long as you don't share the car with a 6'4" partner. So that's fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. So visual aspects of ageing. Let's move on to that. So this is, remember that the doctor, and going back to this question, one of the questions we've got, the doctor might have given the person a clean bill of health, but look what might be going on in terms of vision, for example. Reducing visual acuity, that's the clarity of vision, that difficulty reading the number plate. Now again, reflecting across on one of the questions, what happens to the licence at age 70? One of the things that happens is you need to self-declare your health status on the form that the DVLA sends you. They will send you a form within 90 days of your 70th birthday, or you can actually reapply for your imminently expiring licence online, and you have to say that you can read a number plate at the required distance. I have never yet met an older driver who knows what the distance is in real life. Even if they can quote the figures, they've never actually got a tape measure out and seen how far away it is.
I think that's the case with lots of people.
I think so, isn't it?
Lots of people don't know what
it means.
20.5 metres is.
No,
do they?
That's right.
No.
So when I measure it out, they go, it's not that far away, is it? So I have to show them the little line I've got on my tape measure. Yes, it is, I'm sorry. And in fact, a little funny aside is that I did come across a policewoman checking one of my clients, had visited a client, somebody who lived next door to one of my clients, and she was having terrible trouble unravelling her tape measure and was going to guess it. And so I said, well, I've got a measure in my boot. Would you like me to measure it out? And it turned out the police lady's guess was wrong. And that she needed to step back a little further. So asking somebody to self-declare that they can read a number plate, I really am not sure about that. So all those other things on that slide you find, and I just highlight the reduced colour and the reduced area of visual attention. Those two are really quite interesting. The reducing colour can be that the red is often seen as pink. And if you think about a traffic situation, the red brake lights are designed to alert us and grab our attention. But if you now only see pink, in the hurly-burly of that visual image, are you actually going to see those brake lights? And it might make you a bit late reacting. And the reduced area of visual attention is one of the reasons why older drivers tend to just pay attention straight ahead. It's harder for them to spot things at the corner of their eye. So other things I think a lot of us are really aware of, the poor glare recovery. Those of us like me who are getting well towards that kind of bracket, I've just had an extra coating put on my glasses because I was just beginning to feel the beginning of that problem. And it's a normal change that happens to all of us. And being as I do the job that I do, I wanted my vision to be as good as possible. So have a check. Advise them to have a check with their optician if there's anything they can do. Okay, right. So, eyesight, are your glasses up to date? I went to see somebody last week. Well, you could have grown potatoes in what was on his glasses. I mean, I could have sown seeds on them, then they would have grown. It was terrible. So do keep some wipes in your car for lens wipes. You wouldn't believe the sort of things people try and look through. Not pleasant, but sometimes I ended up dunking them in the sink with a load of washing up liquid, just giving them a complete wash. Absolutely, yeah, poor love. But he was a gentleman with early dementia who was in fact still driving. My job was to see if he could carry on driving, and he'd probably forgotten to clean his glasses and hadn't really noticed the problem. So yeah, keep your lens wipes in the car and do the number plate test. I know we do that as part of our job as driving instructors, but I admit it's easy to forget. Must be done. Okay. And then think about what happens to our thinking skills as we get older. Reducing speed of information processing. That is the information coming in visually and then computing in our brain and then producing a physical response. So that can be quite variable, and especially for somebody who can't concentrate. You'll notice the third one down is not being able to concentrate on more than one or perhaps two things at a time. So you might have an older driver that's busy concentrating on something that you've just taught them. I don't know, and I'm going to be a bit naughty here with Elaine in the audience here. I'm just going to say, because I know she's been working on roundabouts with this particular driver. Hello, Elaine, I'm waving back. You're so useful. I hope you don't mind me using you as an example. So you might be dealing with roundabouts, and all of a sudden, having left a roundabout, your driver just fails to react to let's say, a zebra crossing just after the roundabout, because that driver is still on roundabouts in their head. I'm just pulling ideas from thin air here, but it's that kind of problem, lack of flexibility of thinking, and the reducing executive skills, working things out. With older drivers, when you're looking at their ability, turning right at a roundabout is one of the things we need to build into the assessment process, because actually there is a lot to work out. There is it safe to go kind of decisions, which we all know involves not only the entry road to our right, but all the other roads coming into that roundabout, because they all react off one another. And then also the plotting our path round the roundabout and then working the system so that we come out of it safely. So if somebody's got reducing skills, that executive skills, then that's the kind of scenario that really does show them up. The other thing that we need to think about is that a lot of drivers only do familiar routes. And we'll come back to that in a moment, because I think that's quite an important thing to log when we're doing our interview. So interviewing our driver to find out what capacities they've got, how fit and well are they. Think about what sort of everyday questions you could ask to find out whether there might be any cognitive problems. You're not a psychologist. You can't use the tests that determine whether somebody's got weaknesses, but you can find out how they're managing in everyday life. So I'll give you an example. Say cooking meals is one. You've got a plan. Everything's got to be cooked and ready at the same time. you know, you've got to get everything out of the cupboard and you've got to decide what to start with first, and you've got to chop that up before you add it to the other thing. And you see where I'm going with that. There's a lot to deal with. For attention, how long do they read a newspaper for? Can they watch TV for a reasonable amount of time and concentrate on it, perhaps a film or something like that? Those that use a laptop or PC, find out what they do. You know, are they doing their accounts or are they playing computer games? I mean, either do involve quite a lot of attention. And then the sort of physical visual coordination that's required in bowls or darts or needlework. You've got visual perception going on there, and you've got quick physical responses. So those kind of questions give you a bit of an idea. So normal aging drivers, they will do adaptive driving, slower driving speeds, so they've got time to think and process. A lot will only go out in the day. Now, that's an interesting one because we can't limit the driver's license to drive in the day only here in the UK. Elsewhere in the world, you can have restricted licenses that say daytime only or only within 5 miles of home or 5 kilometres of home and things like that. But and there is research that's quite interesting reading about whether that works or not. I'm not going to go there because we're not abroad, we're here in the UK. But voluntarily, it may be that you only drive in the day and you avoid the rush hour and really busy stuff. Research has shown that turning right here in the UK, turning left in other countries, but here turning right is a really high source of accidents because that's the most difficult one. So the driver will select only easy routes. It may well plan a route that just goes left, left, left and left in order to get where they want to go. They only drive familiar routes and only short distances because of the fatigue. But when you're doing an assessment of somebody's ability, some of those are not really viable. If we can just see the next slide, familiar routes are not always there. I just love that picture. I just had to put it in. I'm sorry. It's not something that happens every day. But I do know where there is one near here, actually. They flip the sign down when it's the time of year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Where is that?
It's down near Reigate.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are one or two of those around. However, unusual things happen. Things like roadworks and diversions. As soon as they're off route, they're absolutely sunk. So you can't rely on familiarity, I'm afraid. So next one, have a think about these. Now, as we get older, we're more likely to have a few of these in the kitchen cupboard or the bathroom cabinet. Now, I know we've talked about medications before, but for anybody who's joining us tonight, just looking at these for side effects. Now, we're more likely to be taking medications. So have a little look, ask what they are, don't be afraid, ask them to bring their tablets to the lesson or the session and then look up the side effects. They've all got a leaflet inside the box so you can have a look. Any drowsiness? Maybe the person might just be losing the edge on their concentration and it might not be age at all, it might be the medication. So just bear that in mind as a thought. And then the next thing we're thinking about is those reaction times. Now I've put 1.7 times slower at the bottom there. There's a little reference for that. So drivers, as we age, drivers can be 1.7 times slower than average. Now, on the back of the highway code, or it used to be on the back, it's in the middle now, but those stopping distances, they are calculated at 0.67 of a second reaction time in laboratory controlled conditions, i.e. with no distractions. So the person knew they were going to get a stimulus and had to react to it. Of course, out on the road it's very different. The stimulus arrives sometimes unexpectedly and we've got to stop. So it is a little longer than that. But if you imagine that stopping distance at 0.67 of a second at 30 miles an hour, and we've got that particular stopping distance, that is now 1.7 times longer distance before that person's brought that car to a halt. And interestingly, reaction times differ whether you're left or right-handed. And that is because different parts of the brain do different things, and your dominant side of your brain, if you're right-handed or left-handed, and the visual stimulus coming in and the way your brain is wired, it actually makes a difference.
Okay.
It's really interesting, and I'm going to confess, I didn't know that till I was researching for this presentation.
So what's quicker?
So that's really, I'm not my husband's left-handed and I'm right-handed. I'm not going to get into that one.
Left-handed.
But yeah, one's quicker. So there you are. I will leave you doing your little research, see if you can find it. It also changes whether it's a visual or an auditory stimulus. And whether you're female or male now. Wow, what about that one?
Here we go.
I found some lovely information. So there you are, there's the reference at the bottom. Go and have a little look at that one and you'll find it all in there. There's the benefit of your evidence-based practice.
Because there are reaction tests you can do. Because I remember when you were at your local forum centre, weren't you? You were up there. I don't know if we're allowed to mention them all. Or not, so,
well, there's 17 around the country, so it's one of 17.
Yeah. So, okay. I know when I did a couple of bits up there with you a few years ago, you tested my reaction times. And I think it was it 0.2 of a second? It was pretty.
Wouldn't surprise me. Pretty good.
Yeah. But I couldn't. Yeah. So knowing what the sort of general one is.
As driving instructors, we tend to be of all the instructors I've tested, tend to be round about 0.2, 0.3 maybe.
Yeah. You have to. It's a case of life and limb sometimes.
It is. Yeah. Sometimes.
It's survival.
Yeah.
You have to be quick.
That's right. So yeah, anybody who's got a job which involves quick reactions are around about 0.2, 0.3. But the times I'm quoting are specific to specific equipment. So those people might be tested on another bit of equipment and the times would come out differently. But on the equipment that the forum centres use, around about 0.2, 0.3. And we would like the general public on that equipment to be round about 0.4 of a second. But as I say, I must say that that's on particular equipment.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to test reaction times, you can find reaction testers, downloadable off the internet, but be aware that the speed that your computer runs can affect the response time readout. So it's a good idea to go and do the test with a lot of your friends of all different ages so that you get a norm for your machine and your equipment.
I'll just move it on. That's me.
That's all right.
My fault.
That's
I'll
okay.
I'll pause for a second.
That's all right. So, pointers to problems. When you arrive, I know it sounds obvious, but check the car in the driveway. The number of times I've arrived at somebody's house and it's all a bit bumped and scraped, it's worth noting. As you're driving out with somebody, think about whether they're noticing all the hazards. Have they got that visual attention only on one thing at a time? Or is it more of a 360 awareness? Are they seeing things coming up either side? Are they looking before they lane change? All those things that we know as ADIs they should be doing. Or are they just focusing totally ahead because the whole thing is just too much? The one thing at a time driving we've covered before. Slow speeds. Now, normal adaptive driving is to slow down a little bit, but again, as ADIs, we know that if you get to the point of causing frustration to other drivers, then you're raising the danger stakes again, because that other driver will go and do something out of frustration, pass unwisely, etc., and so we can't allow too slow. Another thing I'll just mention is tendency to press the wrong pedal, and now that's because we lose the position sense in our feet as we get older. Often older people will start going up and down stairs with looking at their feet, whereas when they were younger they just go up and not bother looking at their feet. Might start hanging on the banisters. Equally, that might be because your knee hurts or something, but it is also just to give a point of reference, and you can work out where your feet are a little bit better if you're hanging on to something. So that's a normal aging process, that you lose the position sense in your feet. And the other thing that, again, is normal is slow decision making. Processing all that information becomes a little bit less quick. So, again, that's something that points to problems. So if you're looking at an older driver and their capacity, here's my little picture of a roundabout near us here. Do please include a roundabout. and plan a route that's going to challenge all the likely weaknesses a senior driver might have. Now, a couple of questions that we had were dealing with drivers who were or had an assessment at one of the national centres, and the route that they will have been asked to drive do include all these kind of things. So it might be that their local route is simpler, but in order to hold a driving licence, you do need to deal with all sorts of situations as they come up, doing a normal drive, and so roundabouts are a particular thing that will have been included. And I've said they include a right turn. I think we've covered that. I think it might be a good point just to focus on those questions on this slide, because we've got one about somebody who's now 94 and is going to have to attend an assessment, and looking at what do they need in order to pass an assessment. Now, having passed a 94-year-old, I certainly wouldn't say it's not a good idea to work with that person. I think what I'd like to do in answer to that, though, is to put my assessor's hat on. Back in the time when I used to work at one of the centres and did the assessments, both the pre-drive clinical and the on-road assessment, I found drivers who had had some retraining very much more difficult to assess, because their performance had been modified by their training. And I'll give you an example. I had a driving instructor with a head injury. Now, I admit he wasn't an older driver, but I'm using him as an example of why it makes it difficult. The driving instructor with a head injury did have some cognitive problems, which meant he was likely to have difficulty with multitasking type information processing skills. And yet, I could tell from his drive that he was driving to a strategy. He was mirror, signal, position, speed, look. I could see it running through his head. And he actually maintained a good drive by doing it by the book, by the rules, until we got into something very complex. And then his cognitive problems surfaced. And so I would just reflect that across to your older driver, because by doing training, you might be masking something that the assessor would want to see. Now that sounds really, really mean, because of course somebody would want to train and do their best. And it's actually you think it's quite sensible to go for training before your assessment. But the assessors are trained to look at whether that driver might be retrainable once they've seen the problem. So we're going to look at, so if I put with my assessor's hat on, I would look at my client in their raw state, exactly how they're driving as of today. And then during the assessment, I would look at whether they can take on new information and assimilate it and change the driving reflexes of a lifetime, which at 94 is going to be difficult, not impossible, but difficult. And if they show potential for retraining, then I could recommend that they will go and have some lessons and then come back for a review. So I've sort of turned it on its head in answering that question. It might be better to go for the assessment first, but it does depend on the driver, and that just is so difficult for me to leave you with that. I'm sorry. It is so individual, but speaking as an assessor, I'd rather see the driver as they actually are without retraining. Moving on, I think, if we may. Speed of decision making, there you are, right turn, that's the one. Is the person going to make a quick, prompt decision on all the information gathered, or is it going to take a while, and are we going to miss a few gaps? I really want to see a nice, confident, quick decision. So, beware, retraining is not always an option. And I think I've probably covered a little bit of that in my previous answer. But if they want to try, and so after the assessment, then at the centre, if I go back to that question, let's say your driver has a go. If they're unsuccessful, then they can retire from driving perhaps a little bit easier, knowing that they have tried. And I would recommend that no more than 5 hours should be devoted to an experienced driver. If you've gone over the 5 hours, there is something wrong. if you can't establish consistency in 5 hours, after all, this person has been driving all their life, all their driving career. They're not a learner. So there's something wrong if it goes over that. And frailty and illness might really interrupt your tuition. So that is actually in itself worth bearing in mind. But if that person is ill several times during the course of tuition, are they really well enough? Because during those times they haven't come for lessons. It means they haven't been well enough to drive. So that actually forms part of the outcome decision, that actually really you're not well enough to drive often enough that we can really do a lot of work. I think it's better to look at alternatives. So let's think about facing the unthinkable. And I'm going to just rattle through these last few because obviously driving instructors are for driving, but let's just pause for a mo on these. If you do have to advise somebody that in your opinion it's best not to drive, then see if you can have a family member or carer present when you give that information. I always think it's rather like giving a nasty medical diagnosis. It is something the driver doesn't want to hear. They're going to be shocked and they need somebody with them if at all possible. Think about using the term retiring from driving. They've retired from work. Let's retire from driving. And another thing you can say is that just as you retired from your job, doubtless with an impeccable CV, retire from driving with an impeccable driving CV before it's blemished by an accident. And then you can be proud of your driving career. Try and think along those kind of lines, and it sort of softens it a little bit. Obviously, the personality of the person you're talking to will affect how you explain it, but think about it along those lines. It is a huge negative life event. It is like being told you've had cancer, you've got cancer. It is horrible. And firmness is required because you will get arguments, you will get anger, you will get tears, you will get, you've ruined my life, I'm going to jump off the nearest railway bridge, and those kind of things. The fact that they're reacting in some way is healthy. Even if they're angry, it's good. If they don't react, and I had one a couple of weeks ago who sat and stared at the wall, that was very worrying, and I wrote to their GP because that was an unhealthy reaction, and I think that was one of those people whose health will suddenly go downhill, and I did feel I needed the GP to know. So a reaction is great, even if it's hard to deal with. Finish with a look at the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is what doctors do when they give you a bad diagnosis. They say, right, you have cancer, now this is what we're going to do about it. And they give you hope. So what you need to do is steer it towards, okay, so where is your nearest bus stop? Or how do you think you might get to the shops now? Or what about the WI, or whatever it is, church, or whatever it is that the person does. Find out about their lifestyle. And yes, you haven't got time for a major counselling session. You've probably got a learner booked in the next hour. But just take a moment to just give them a look forward to start them off. Now, it may be that you've been asked to see a friend, older relative or something like that, and that's why you've got involved. You might feel that it is your role to suggest surrendering the driving licence. But I think the best thing to do would be to suggest a second opinion. For a start, it gets the responsibility off your lap onto somebody else's. And I suggest they do go to one of the Forum Mobility Centres for a specialist assessment, because then it's a third party dealing with it. So if you need help, there's your local Forum Centre, can be found at that address. And the centres are positioned around the country. Give you a little map now. We've given this on the other webinars, but I do stress that they are there to help you. If your analysis looks like this really isn't a very good idea to carry on driving, let somebody else have a look and back it up. And a final slide on giving up from driving. When I made this slideshow, it was snowing, so I thought that was quite a good picture, but hey, it's not snowing now, here anyway. But any of you who've got snow, hopefully that will make you feel at home. So things to think about. Start planning alternatives. Now, if you're seeing somebody who you think can carry on driving for a little while, but perhaps it's coming towards the end of their driving career. You've given them a little bit of rehabilitation. It looks like they can go on a bit longer. Counsel them to start learning the bus routes, because if when you stop driving you haven't any idea what bus to take, you're really stuck. But if you've already started doing it, then it's not such a big issue. So think of planning for driving cessation and perhaps doing some bus journeys, perhaps with a family member if you're not sure. Bigger commitment, of course, is moving house. But then you've got some individual lifestyle issues to think about. I had one recently where the husband, who was the driver who was advised not to drive anymore, he was somebody who used to take the dog up the local common for a walk and in the estate car. And the wife was like, well, how are we going to walk the dog? So there's your individual lifestyle issue, one example. They were in the happy position of being able to pay a dog walker to come and do it for them, but not everybody is quite that flush. So have a think about all those kind of things. How about learning to shop on the internet? I know some of these are quite obvious, but maybe if you have never had to think of them before, it's just a bit of a thought there to think around people's problems. Okay, so there we are, etc., etc. Do you think that's a good place to stop? Because the next slide is the questions.
Yeah, and we've got quite a few.
Oh, right. Okay, shall we go?
I need to go back, so I've been emailing everyone, keep questions coming. We will address them at the end. So
we've got time.
There's been a few bits and bobs on that. We are going back to Colin's one first of all. So many older drivers are worried about losing their licence if they are assessed. Mm-hmm. How would you counter that? So I think you've gone.
Oh, yes. I think that is a really hard one, and I think you just have to be a little bit objective about it, in that a driver may not want to lose their licence, but it might be the right time that it has to happen. That sounds really hard. But I think we have to start there. If the background for the question is, maybe if we gave them a little bit of tuition, they might carry on a bit longer, just be aware of that business of covering up things that we do need to see. If somebody's got variable attentional skills, it might be that they could pull the rabbit out of the hat on the day, but then they still have that problem afterwards and might be at higher than average risk. And I think don't underestimate the skills of the assessors at the mobility centres. They are there to help maintain mobility. That is the default setting. The defaults, I think that's perhaps, I'm thinking out loud while I'm answering this, because of course it is off the cuff, because I didn't know, when you don't know the questions coming in, it sort of takes a moment sometimes to actually formulate the right response. I think that's the right response is actually more along those lines, that although you bear in mind that yes, it might be time that person has to give up the licence, at the assessment centres they exist to keep people mobile if it is at all possible safely. So yeah, they will try extra mirrors if somebody's observations are poor. They will try a bit of retraining if it looks viable. And so I think if somebody's scared to go and have an assessment, I think that's the tack, to actually say, look, they're there to help you stay driving longer if it is safely possible.
That's it. I mean, you don't want them, or there's an alternative.
If you keep driving and you're not able to.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the sort of thought
flow
that you had. Yeah, do come back if that's not quite what you meant. It's just a correlation doesn't mean driving is good for your health. Okay, no, we wouldn't use driving. Absolutely. What it's saying is that by limiting somebody's lifestyle, their mental health and their mental flexibility and the speed of information processing is naturally going to slow down. I mean, how many times, I'm just thinking how to say it in everyday life. Okay, if anybody's ever been in hospital, you are in a particular environment where there's not a lot of stimulation, you're sitting or you're lying, There might be the TV, there might be your mobile and that kind of thing. But basically it has been a very much quieter lifestyle. Now on the day you are discharged and you're taken home in the car, I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, by the time you get home you're absolutely exhausted. All that traffic, all that noise, all that hubbub, it crashes into you as if you think, wow, how did I cope with all this? Another one is how many people have been, let's say you've had a fortnight off work and you've been on holiday and you've slowed down, you've relaxed, you've been on that beach and you come back and that first day back at work, it's how the heck did I do all this?
Yeah.
And that's quite an example of how when you stop doing that thing that keeps you going, you slow down. And I think that's what they mean on that study. It doesn't mean, you're quite right, it doesn't mean driving is good for your health, but it does mean you're getting out and about and you're doing stuff and you're thinking faster, and by stopping driving, you slow down.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I can definitely relate to the, even on a Monday morning, it's a struggle.
That's true. Bus lanes.
It seems bus lanes can be a problem for older drivers that you do not regularly drive in such environments.
Yeah.
How can we train or assess if there are no bus lanes around, say, in Woking, for example?
Yes. Pass. Now, you're thinking of somebody perhaps, I might be putting 2 and 2 together and making 146, but are you thinking of somebody who might be assessed in an environment with bus lanes, but you can't help train them? Yeah, that's a problem. I don't know how to answer that one, to be honest. I'm not going to pretend. It is a problem. And I think if I can just take it to the point of somebody being faced with something they don't normally encounter on an assessment, I think that is, again, something that needs to be, the assessors need to be advised about that if somebody's going for an assessment. I always ask my drivers when they last drove in town. I'm thinking particularly of my work on Guernsey. There is only one town. Well, there's a shopping area and a town, 2 separate places. And I ask them where they go to shop, and I'm trying to assess what level of traffic they're used to dealing with. So my assessment route takes them into the big town, but if they don't normally go there, I have to bear that in mind. So what I'm looking at is their ability to cope with it from the point of view of not having been in this town for about 9 months or a year. So they might be a bit hesitant, they might make the odd mistake, but it's not the mistake I'm worried about, it's what they do about it. Are they 360 aware? Do they put their signal on early? Do they wait for that slot to change lanes and put it right because they happen to have got in the wrong lane because they didn't know they had to be in the other one, and those kind of things. And with your bus lane question, I suppose I would sort of put that kind of flavour to my response. If the client tells the assessor, but we don't have bus lanes in Worthing or Timbuktu or wherever, Woking, and I'm really not sure about them, then the assessor would then know that there's some leniency needed there.
Sure.
If they're worth anything, worth their salt.
Yeah.
I don't know, again, if that... Is there a cost? Very good question. There is a cost. It varies from centre to centre.
This is a cost if someone requests an assessment at Forum,
yes.
Because not everybody can see the question, so
okay.
just read
I apologise.
No.
Okay. Yes, there is a cost to attend a centre. Some are charities, and obviously have to cover their costs, but they are also funded to a degree by the government on a per capita basis. So it's a subsidised fee that is paid, and obviously find out what that is for the individual centre near you, because it does vary depending on the parent organisation that runs the centre. But a very good tip is that if the DVLA require an assessment, the DVLA will pay for the assessment. So it depends on your route for the referral. So if a doctor is unhappy about somebody's driving, or if there's a police report to the DVLA or a medical report of some sort, then the DVLA can refer.
Okay.
So they could go to their GP and ask for a recommendation, license renewal, because the GP has to certify the person is fit.
Sure,
if they
yeah.
have, let me correct myself, if they have a medical condition, the GP is involved in license renewal.
Which is what you've put on previous webinars, especially the last
Correct,
one where you
yeah.
had all your flow charts. So,
Yeah, go and have a look at that.
yeah.
But yes, where there is a medical condition, let's say an older person quite commonly might have something like, let's say, Parkinson's disease. So you do have to have a medical renewal. And the GP can say, in the little box where it says, is this person fit to drive, recommend practical assessment, and then the cost is covered.
Excellent. Okay, Henry is asked for the website again for the local assessment centres.
Go and have a look at the other webinar, because we could probably look it up. I can look it up on mine, actually.
It's
www.
If you go on to Google, Henry, you just go to Google and you type in forum
You can Google it, yeah.
mobility centres.
I'm just getting it up, actually.
And it will come up on there for you. So it's just Google, type in forum of mobility centres. And I'm showing the slide again. So that's what you need to type in. And
got it.
It's is it coming up? Oh,
yeah. HTTP.
Yeah, it's www.mobility-centres.org. So it's .uk. Sorry, yeah.
.org.uk.
I'm used to the DIA's website.
Right,
.org, so I missed the .uk. So that's www.mobility-centres.org.uk.
And incidentally, once you get on the site, there's a little button for Find a Centre, and then you can find the one nearest you.
Fantastic. Okay.
Bus lane.
Oh, it was Jean-Pierre. He's asking about the bus lane. Thanks for the bus lane. It does provide an answer.
Thank you. Oh, good.
Right. I have a lady who is 65 and learning to drive in my manual car. Her progress is very slow. There are no automatic instructors in our area, and she would have to travel 20 miles to Shrewsbury for an automatic instructor. Should I advise her to try an automatic vehicle or persevere with the manual? Oh dear.
Oh, in theory, I would advise somebody who's struggling, and it depends how many lessons she's been struggling, but I reckon from the question it's probably quite a lot. I would go automatic, not least because it does kit her out for the future. And if she's spent a lot of money and she's not making it, then the multitasking might be the issue. Just dealing with the whole task. And unfortunately, we do lose our mental flexibility as we get older. And that whole business of dealing with lots of things at once just does become a bit of an issue. I appreciate her problem of having to go so far. My thoughts are whether she might benefit from an intensive course. I don't know, I'm shooting in the dark here, but might she have a relative somewhere she could go and stay with for a week and have a week's intensive course? If she's got relatives somewhere else in the country, you never know, that might open up some possibilities. I'm trying to be creative here. Short of buying her own car, but that's going to be tricky because then we're involved in teaching in the pupil's own car insurance type situations. And you want to be sure she's going to do it before she makes that investment. I think an intensive course somewhere might be good.
Yeah, it does sound like a more of a likely
I think so, yeah.
outcome, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, very good question though. I think you're right, automatic.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, coming back to the oopsie daisy, a very small text box on this.
We can only see one line at a time of your questions.
Webinar. They're very, very good people that go to webinar, but the text boxes need to be a bit bigger. Right. Okay. I think this is coming from, so we didn't keep people driving when they were not fit. Okay. That point was more than adequately addressed later in the webinar. Thank you.
Okay, right.
Lovely. Okay. Yeah, and someone's asked, is there access to the webinar after it finishes this evening? It won't be available this evening because when we're done, I have to convert it on my laptop, and then our tech guy at DIA has to do all sorts of things with it and put it on the members area. There are some of our previous webinars in the members area of our website, driving.org. So log into members area on there and have a little look. Sue said she logged in and she said she couldn't see her webinars. So hopefully they're on there. They should be, as far as I'm aware. And if they're not, I'll give Matt a kick around the office tomorrow.
Yeah. Can I hasten to say it was only for feedback, so I knew if I came over all right. It wasn't sort of any sort of self-gratification. I just wanted to hear what it sounded like to people who were listening.
Yeah.
And were we doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all very helpful. So that's lovely.
Thank you.
That's it for the questions.
Oh, good.
So we've answered quite a few on there. Sorry for sort of mumbling and sort of reading them out because it's, as I say, we're trying to read a line at a time. It's a bit tricky. Have you got any more?
I think I'm anxious whether we have. I know I pulled bits from the questions that had been emailed through, hoping to cover them during the presentation. I don't know that I particularly well covered the after 70. What happens with a license at 70? So you get a form from DVLA about 90 days before your 70th birthday, and you can send D46P comes from DVLA, fill that in and send it off, or you can use a normal D1 application if you happen not to have received it, and there is an online site where you can reapply for your license within the 90 days of expiry. So hopefully that helps with that one.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got Henry saying, we're very helpful. Be speaking to you about 80-plus guy I've got coming up with Parkinson's.
Oh, right. Yes, we can talk about Parkinson's.
Yeah, so I think, Henry, you're going to get in contact at another time.
Get in touch, yeah.
And that's it for all your questions at the moment. So unless anyone's got anything the next minute, do come on the course. You will learn lots. It's going to be fabulous. Right, here we go. So we're going to wrap up tonight. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time. And, we have gone a little bit over 8 o'clock, but it's been, great to interact and answer your questions. So have a look at our website for those of you who haven't at the moment, driving.org/training, course information and booking and future webinars. This is the end of the mini-series that we've been doing with Sue, so we've hijacked her for three evenings, and we can't afford her anymore.
My husband said, is this happening every week?
Slightly funny, yeah. So
he needs me back to cooking dinner on Wednesdays, Tuesdays, whatever it is today.
Absolutely. So that's run out. So but Sue, you will be able to have it on Walton on Thames on the 6th of March and Manchester on the 17th of April. So if you haven't joined one of those courses yet, then please do. We only have put 2 on there for now, just to kind of see how they go, because it's a very sort of specific subject. It's not for everybody, and so we didn't want to release dates here, there and everywhere if there wasn't going to be the uptake. We've not done anything like this before, so it's a new venture for everybody. But pleased to say we've got 30, 35 on the Walton on Thames, and Manchester's getting almost level pegging, so that's fantastic. So there's been a good demand for these, and I have got a list on my desk at work of all the other areas that everyone was requesting Sue and her expertise. So we'll address those as and when. We'll get some of these out, get these ones done, and see how it goes from there. If you want to register for any future DIA webinars, then register in the usual way. I did today. We have released. If you go to that website, driving.org/training, click on webinars at the bottom of the page. I did put a new one up today, which is going to be myself and maybe someone from DVSA discussing the trials to the L test. And, you know, there's lots of questions around them at the moment. We're getting a lot of calls at the ADI help desk. So if you do want to know a bit more about that, I have information straight from the horse's mouth at DVSA, hot off the press, and they've even allowed me to use their own slides. So, you know, it's totally official information. So if you're interested in that, I can't remember the date off the top of my head. It's early March. So go to our website, have a little look and get yourself registered on there if that's for you. We've got some other ones coming up as well. So we've got a franchise one as well. So if any, you know, lots of people got franchise woes and queries and things. So Karen and I will do our best to answer those for you. So thank you, everyone. That's absolutely wonderful. And, you know, get yourself booked on there. We look forward to, you know, hear from you, seeing you again. So thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Take care, everyone.